Welcome back to County Connection. For this segment, we're going to be talking about winter travel along the state highways. And here to join us and enlighten us are partners from CDOT, Tracy Truelove and Patrick Chavez. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. All right, so it is officially winter. We're feeling it outside finally this year. It took a little longer to arrive than normal, but here it is at last. And so we just want to talk about some of the things that people should be aware of as we enter the winter travel season. And so two of the most important things that Colorado drivers should know about, whether you live here or you're visiting, are the chain law and the traction law. So Patrick, can you shed some light on what those two laws are all about and what people need to be aware of?
Sure. We have been using traction law and chain law more often in the past couple seasons. So passenger vehicle traction law is what we call is for Code 15 within the regulations, but it's we've termed it traction law because it deals a lot with the tires that the travelers are using when they're traveling up here. So when we have a traction law in, it requires that passenger vehicles need to have mud or snow or winter tires, or they have an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicle with all four tires engaged. If they do not have those, they need to have chain or alternate traction devices installed on their tires.
Okay, and for people who may not be familiar with that term, mud snow tires, what is that, and how do they know if? How do folks know if they have those sorts of tires?
They will check on the side of the tires, and it will normally say either M&S or all-season tire.
Okay.
So, and that really is the designation, but the more, I guess the generic term is mud and snow.
Okay. And then how about chain law?
Chain law is for commercial vehicles. We continue to use that. That's always been ongoing. So all commercial vehicles, semi-trucks, and other commercial vehicles, when the commercial vehicle chain law is implemented, they need to have chains installed on all their drive tires. We have a passenger vehicle chain law that we haven't used as often in past seasons, but we are starting to look at that as a more of an alternate option for when we're trying to get people driving in the storms. So if we implement a passenger vehicle chain law, that means that the drive tire on the passenger vehicle has to have chains, either chains or an alternate traction device. Okay.
And then how will people know when these various laws go into effect?
We will send out the notifications in several ways. So one, we'll post them on the electronic VMS signs on the highway. We'll also send out in the Gov deliveries. There's text and email notifications that are sent out to the public can sign up for. Mm-hmm. And we're also posting them onto our website, cotrip.org.
Okay. And then in the bigger picture, how do these laws help keep roads functioning? What are the goals?
The main goal is to keep traffic moving on I-70. So when we put these codes or the laws, the traction or chain laws into effect, it's there to ensure that the vehicles that are traveling on I-70 are able to get the traction so they can continue moving. So once we have vehicles that stop or spin out and they block the rest of the traffic behind them, it becomes much more difficult and it becomes a safety issue if we have people trapped up on some of the passes or some of the higher elevations where we cannot get emergency vehicles or get them to facilities. It can become a very big safety concern for them.
Right. So another strategy that CDOT has been employing a little bit differently or currently or in recent years is the safety closure. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what a safety closure is and how that's shifted a little bit?
So in the past, a lot of times they would wait for the traffic to break down or to become congested and stopped before they put in a closure. What we're looking at now currently is to start working on implementing the closures a little sooner. So as we start to see road conditions deteriorate and we start to see where there is becoming a traction issue for a lot of the vehicles traveling on I-70, we'll put in a safety closure to allow us, one, to clear out some of the vehicles that are having problems, and two, to allow the plows to get in there and really plow the roads to get them to a better condition so that we can reopen the roads to the rest of the traffic.
Great. So the idea is possibly more closures, but of shorter duration.
And that's
It
what
will
we've
be
seen. In
end
the
of
past couple
result.
seasons that we've started using the proactive closures, we have seen an increase of closures, but the duration of the closures that we implement have been shorter. So that's shown that it's having an effect that we want, and that it enables us to get the road open quicker.
Okay, great. So when closures do happen on the interstate, sometimes traffic can get backed up into the adjacent state highways or on local streets. So I know that CDOT is working with local partners to kind of address some of those issues. So what's going on that front?
So we definitely have, with Patrick in place as the corridor manager, build solid relationships with the local law enforcement, EMS, fire. And we still recognize, though, that these mountain towns aren't really, designed to hold a great deal of traffic. One thing we don't do sometimes is call an alternative route, and there's a lot of reasons why we might not do that. If you're not familiar with how to drive in Colorado weather and on Colorado roads, and then we all of a sudden start to push a bunch of traffic on a 2-lane highway, we tend to see another situation spin out of control. It happens sometimes when we put people over US 6 Loveland Pass.
Right.
So a lot of times we're letting people use their free will to make a decision about whether or not they're skilled enough to drive on some of those highways. And an example here locally is obviously Colorado 9, to 285.
Right.
And so that's just something that we've always kind of held close. If we see a bluebird day, which we've had when there's been an incident on the other side of the tunnel, we will often put an alternate route out and give people that opportunity. But when it's snowing, it's a different story on those 2-lane highways.
Right. And particularly in places where we may not have people who are familiar with those routes and have driven them before, that it takes maybe some extra knowledge when the weather is inclement.
And that's the challenge we're having now with people that choose to come on the corridor when a traction law is in place, but they're not equipped properly, or they don't have the experience to drive. I mean, we see a lot of comments from our, motorists about how frustrated they are that, I'm a native here, why aren't you just letting me on? Well, it's a question about safety, and if we have people on there that aren't making good choices around safety, it does impact everyone and the corridor. Even though our team will have been out in full force, working the system or the storm system well before it, we're still seeing a lot of people rolling the dice and making a different decision.
Right. So Tracy, given the kind of changing conditions we face in the wintertime, as well as the fluctuations in the amount of traffic volume on the highways at any given time, what are some of the best public information channels that people can use to get the best information they need to make a decision about when to travel or what the conditions might be?
So there's a couple places to go, and Patrick mentioned cotrip.org. It's definitely our workhorse of information, for statewide. You can find anything you want. There's a tool on there called the Plow Tracker. So if you're determining where you're going to go, you can go on and see if we've had plows just out ahead of you. But again, it's a good place to just have general information. We also actively use our social media platforms, being Facebook and Twitter. But what I'd like to remind people is that we are two people usually doing that. One of us is on Facebook and one of us is on Twitter. And we get inundated. I mean, you can imagine the amount of people that travel this corridor. Pat he probably lives and breathes the numbers more than I do. But we recognize there's some frustration folks have about us not being able to put out estimated times opening. And I'd like to just touch on that, because really we hold that close to the vest, because we recognize that conditions can change dramatically and quickly. And if we set an expectation that we're going to get open and then we don't, we tend to just make people a lot madder than they might already have been.
Right.
So we ask people to be patient with us. Pat's team does a great job of trying to update the information on an hourly basis. Sometimes if we have several incidences occurring on the highway in front of you, it might not be updated on CoTrip as fast, but usually on Facebook and Twitter, we're still trying to keep up with that or give people different options if they ask about what we would suggest or maybe where they're located and where they need to go.
Okay, and then there have been some changes in terms of the your notification system and people's ability to kind of select an area that they're interested in understanding conditions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Pat might be able to jump in here on me, but we've had a system called Gov Delivery that you're able to go onto our website, sign up for alerts, but it was a little bit clunky in about how you could filter or down to what you want to know about. And I know you and I have talked about how lot of people raise the white flag and say, okay, enough alerts already.
Right.
I don't need to know what the whole state is doing.
Right.
So the system that we're moving towards is going to be a little bit better at filtering exactly. You're able to choose what you want, very specific information that you're going to get. And there's just some stuff that they're still trying to like fix some of the glitches on before that completely rolls out.
Okay.
I also know that our 511 system, and you might want to talk to this, is also going to be making a change, that it's being updated with the updates going into the CTMS system that we use.
Yeah. And in the past, we were using a system where a person would get on and they would record what the conditions are and what to expect as they were traveling on the corridor and in other highways within Colorado. We're going to a system that now is more automated. So as we create the events within our system, the system will take that information and they'll create the message that people will hear when they call in. This hopefully will give a little bit more timely notification when people call into and they have a better update of what's happening.
Okay, fantastic.
And Julie, I know you're talking to Margaret Bowes with I-70 Coalition sometime today too. She'll probably be able to explain more about the app, because the app from CDOT's perspective, it's still being updated, but it doesn't seem to be updated as often as our information is. So
Okay.
again, our system is the place to go if you're looking for information.
All right. And then, so that kind of takes care of this winter travel season. What about if we look a little farther into the future? What are some of the projects that are planned for the I-70 Mountain Corridor?
I can go.
Go ahead.
Well, I know that we are currently looking at a westbound express lane project, and there's a project leadership team that's working on it. Obviously, what it all comes down to, though, is how the funding shakes out, and I believe that one, though, has risen to the top as a priority for one that we're looking, just like the Mountain Express Lane eastbound has really proven to be working well.
Yeah.
So there's a good, reason to go ahead and do that. From here, Vail Pass, we're looking at an auxiliary lane project that would put some lanes, an additional lanes in sections of Vail Pass. Again, in the initial early design phases and even study phases of those projects, but without construction money right now to really, be able to say when they would come to fruition. And then here locally, you've probably been talking about the GAP project, which with the CO9 Iron Springs project finishing, we're looking at that last section of this corridor to make it complete so that you've got those 4 lanes from Fresco to Breckenridge.
Okay.
And we're also looking at the operations side. So as we've gone through the past couple seasons, we've really done an outreach to the ski resorts as well as the communities. 2 seasons ago, we worked with the I-70 Coalition in order to do that outreach, a formal outreach, and have a meeting with the ski resorts and with the different communities, and really find out how can we work better together to, one, respond to the incidents, and then how do we get that information out to the traveling public so that they can make a decision if they need to be on the highway or not. So
Right.
we're really trying to do that cooperative outreach and the cooperation with the communities and with the ski resorts so that we can have a more effective response during incidents and to help the traveling public as best we can.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Tracy and Patrick, for coming into the SCTV studio and coming all the way east and west to share information with folks in Summit County. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks
You're
for
welcome.
having us.
All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to stay on the transportation topic with Margaret Bowes from the I-70 Coalition.